information in the brain. After 5 and 6, if the child does not necessarily get the input at this particular point to start learning how to make sounds and get speech therapy, it's a lot harder to teach a 5 and 6-year-old how to become a better person regarding the tone, the muscle tone, strengthening the muscle tone physically, as well as from occupational exercises if they never had it previously from birth on.
You had mentioned that one of the symptoms, one of the manifestations could be a very weak muscle tone in the neck area.
Well, not so much the neck area, but I'm talking about the head. Okay, so you're talking about if you have a weak muscle tone in the eyes, for instance, and part of the face, you would have a hard time turning your head and doing a two-step command. Okay, as far as, because globally you're looking straight. Now, if somebody throws you a ball from the left field, you'd have a hard time turning your head around to catch that ball because of the weakness you have. You don't have strong muscles. Okay, that's what I meant to infer.
What are like the initial symptoms or manifestations that one should be looking out for?
From the way the child is born, basically within the first 6 months, as the child is sitting up, making sure the child can sit up. Do they have problems physically sitting up? Are there weaknesses in the muscles? Not only the child sitting up properly, but can they push themselves up?
When should a child sit up or be able to sit up? Around what age?
Basically about 6 months.
Yeah. 6
months is usually approximately when they start sitting up, because you have, prior to that, the child would be laying on their stomach, learning how to roll over, so pushing themselves up from their arms, rolling over to their back, and vice versa. And then eventually they learn how to push themselves up to be able to sit up, holding on to things, pulling themselves up, and things like that. So that is one thing they certainly, and also if the child is not, when you call them, if they don't make any noises, if they don't look any eye contact, things like that. That's one thing if a child is paying attention to something else. But you also have to make sure that they look at you and have eye contact at that early age as well, as they're developing. So this way they know who you are. They not only recognize you, but they also will come to you, or at least give you some indication that they're understanding what you're saying and acknowledge that.
I've observed it, with relatives and friends, but it's got to be a tough thing to deal with.
Well, I'll put it this way. It is hard, but at the same time, your intuition as a parent is the best advocate. If you think that there's a problem, because if you look at other relatives, cousins, and things like that, at that particular age who are already running or sitting up and moving, and yours is not, you could say, well, they're a little slower, but wait a minute, maybe there is a problem, and going to your regular pediatrician. But at the same time, if you don't see anything when you go to the regular pediatrician as far as them questioning about speech and part of developing and things like that, then going to a developmental pediatrician who is more likely trained from medical school to question things. Why isn't your child sitting up? Has your child ever caught the ball, rolled the ball, played with items and things like that? So therefore, from there, and then going to early intervention and getting diagnosed. One of the problems without getting diagnosed is early intervention will not necessarily know how to help your child if you don't get a diagnosis. Whether you want to call it apraxia or nonverbal or something of that nature, you have to get some sort of diagnosis, or else the child would not necessarily be able to get the services, because you need at least a third or more of a deficit from early intervention standards in order to get services.
I don't understand what you mean by that. A deficit, a third or more of a deficit.
Okay. What I meant to say is they have a particular, if you want to call it a measure, and a measure from certain individual things like muscle tone and speech and hearing and attention and things like that. And what they'll do is they'll come over to your house, the early intervention people, when they give you an assessment, and they'll ask you a bunch of very specific questions from a speech pathologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, and things like that, which you're supposed to answer depending on what your child is like. And from that assessment, they will determine whether you are eligible for speech and language services or occupational therapists from early intervention. So it's not just, well, being a little delayed and being fine everywhere else where your child runs around and plays and things like that. It has to be specifically more than a third of a deficit.
I see.
So whether it's one particular area, whether it's speech, or it might be a physical area of muscle tone or things like that, and then other issues as well.
It's quite encompassing. There's many manifestations, many symptoms of this disease, and the best thing you could do is arm yourself with knowledge to recognize it. But I like what you said. Really, your parental intuition is your best weapon against this.
And if you're not sure, it doesn't hurt to call a developmental pediatrician and just say, look, I think there might be a problem. Can you see my child for an evaluation? If there's no problem, what did it cost you, an evaluation? If there is a problem and you didn't know it, then at least you're getting on the right track and you're getting help for your child.
Tell us about your son. He's 13 now?
Yes.
Yeah. And he's talking, he's speaking?
He's fine.
Yeah.
He still has one of the things about apraxia, there's also another title called Children Apraxia of Speech, which I don't use, which is called CAS for short. The reason that I say I don't use that word is that it gives you an infer that from birth to 5 you might have this disorder and then you're cured. That's not the case at all. It's not you were at birth you were diagnosed, or 2 years old or whatever, and at 5 you're healed and everything's honky-dory. No, it's not the case. When you have a child that has a speech disorder, because of the weak links in the brain, you're always going to have some sort of deficit. Okay? Even though the child can overcome certain words and certain blends, that they become very creative. Another example, my son at the early stages could not say a W, could not say a Y, could not say a L, could not say a P. So, just to give an example, Winnie the Pooh would not be Winnie the Pooh, it would be Yee-Ooh. Because he couldn't say the P, he couldn't say the L, he couldn't say the W. Yellow was Wowo, because the L and the W sound the same to him.
Right.
So you've got certain blends that, as the children hear sounds, because they've never had the beginning sounds of remembering what the sound was, they have a problem with the blends. Certain blends, word blends. So the child learns, if they have a problem with that blend, they can possibly learn, as they're talking, to use another word to substitute that word. That means the same thing, because they know they have a problem with that L or the B or the... My son, for longest time, couldn't say steam. So ST was real hard for him. So team, a team train. Well, we know it's a steam train, but he couldn't say the ST and he couldn't say the TR. So just to give you some example, he had to learn how to do that from intensive speech therapy and other therapies. One of them is called the Prompt Institute, which teaches muscle tone, specifically jaw and throat articulation. It teaches, in other words, you have a word called mom, M-O-M, and you think, it's just mom, M-O-M. Not really. What they teach you in the child, actually, not you as a parent, but the child as well, they teach you how to break the M sound apart. So there might be 4 or 5 steps learning how to put the tongue out or the tongue back, how to put the jaw frontwards or the jaw backwards, how to make that approximate sound for the M. Might be 3 or 4 steps. And the child eventually would learn how to produce that sound, and then they could, I remember, and then you would remember the O and the other M. But it's only from repetitive therapies that the child would remember. That's just one sort of therapy. Another therapy is called horns and whistles, which basically is the horn is not necessarily a real horn, but it's almost like a plastic horn that specifically would help the child with her breathing and also help the child make a specific sound, as well as with a horn and the whistle. It would take you, for instance, blowing a cotton ball across the floor on the table. You would use a specific horn, and that horn would help you not only inhale properly and blow the cotton ball across the table, but it's from that horn. Each horn is
that you would hear the sound.
Not so much the sound per se, but it's part of how it's designed. So in other words, each horn, there's 20-step horns and whistles. So it's not so much a whistle that you would hear like somebody whistling on a whistle for a coach. But each horn is designed the way it's produced that the child would learn how to articulate blowing from their mouth. In other words, each step would be a harder horn or a harder whistle than the previous one. And so eventually they would get up to number 20, and they could do a sound or a blowing motion that they never did prior. So that's just to give you, that's some of the speech therapy therapies that you could do, as far as from the professional would do, I would say.
My guest is the president and the founder of the Apraxia Network of Bergen County. Her name is Jeanne Buesser. You are a remarkable person.
Well,
I don't know.
Thank you very much.
You are just such a fascinating person and such a strong person, and I don't know what it is. You got a great vibe.
Thank you very much.
You're a can-do person. I love your business card, because on Jeanne's business card it says every day is a new beginning. Why does it say that?
Well, the reason that I like that slogan is it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Certain days you will be able to move forward and you hear the sounds or the words or the things like that, and the next day you go back to the beginning or even before. You never know how to, in other words, there's a journey, how to get to the top, but as you crawl and walk, sometimes you stumble and you fall down and you have to get up again. So it's not a question of, this is a journey where your baby is born and then you go through high school and then you go from college and everything else. No one knows how the journey goes, and each journey is a step. And sometimes you go forward, sometimes you go backwards. You have, on top of speech therapy, you also have other issues, occupational issues, where the child has a problem holding a pencil, holding a crayon. That's where I was talking about occupational therapy as well, not only for the low muscle tone in the body, but in the hands.
I know you want to get your information out about your website and your organization's website. Could you do that?
Yes, sure. Many websites have a lot of information. One specific is Cherub, CHERAB.org. Another one is called alltalkradio.com. Another one is Speechville, SPEECHVILLE.com. And there's also the Learning Disability Association of New Jersey. And the fourth one is NewJerseyGroups.com, which is an organization that has a lot of not only support groups for people with all sorts of not only disabilities but conditions throughout the world, and where to go for help.
And I would imagine if somebody just Googled the Apraxia Network of Bergen County, they might be led to some of those sites?
Well, they certainly would be led to my site, and therefore they could email me or whatever case, and I could pass out a lot of information. That's what I do at the websites. If people come to the meeting, I give them a lot of information about apraxia and resources and things like that, or else I mail it to their houses if they cannot attend, if they're not in the area.
Well, thank you so much, Jeanne Buesser. And again, my guest, Jeanne Buesser. She's the president, the founder of the Apraxia Network of Bergen County, a remarkable woman, and we're just so happy that you stopped by to speak to us here today.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the help.
Thank you, Jeanne.
Take care.
Yeah, what a pleasure. WFME Reports is a public affairs presentation produced by your friends here at WFME. Please keep in mind that the content and commentary of our guests are not necessarily the opinions of WFME or Family Stations Incorporated. I'm your host, Jay Trelease. Have a great day.